Hi everyone, I'm talking to Bill Pascrell today. Hi Bill, how are you?
Hi, Catie. Pleasure to see you this morning.
Good to see you too. I'm happy to have you and talk to you a little bit because, I'm very much into responsible gambling. I would love to learn more about it. And the thing many people also know is so different from state to state. It's not one thing you can just learn responsible gambling for the US. It's so detailed depending on which local area you're in. So I wanted to start off by asking you just a little bit. Can you tell me how the landscape for gambling looks right now when it comes to responsible gambling, please?
Well, we've had digital gaming in America for approaching 10 years now, for casino and poker. We just celebrated our fifth year anniversary for sports betting, both retail and online outside of Nevada. I think that we have a long way to go in terms of being more in tune with how to approach consumer protection and responsible gambling. As you know, Catie, I'm a part of the Entain Foundation Responsible Gambling organization, working across the globe and particularly in North America to try to educate and advocate for RG. So far so good. We haven't had major issues of escalation in problem gambling, but we're also just very new into the process. We're doing studies with various organizations. And the only thing I could say at the front of this great conversation with you is operators need to take this far more seriously than they have been.
That's super great point. So can I ask you this, why is responsible gambling so important in your opinion?
Well, there's two reasons. One, you could either be involved in it because it's the responsible, moral, and ethical thing to do, or if you're just commercially entrenched and that's all you care about, it's also the commercially responsible thing to do. And why is that? So, Catie, if we go back, 20, 30 years ago, I used to be just a brick and mortar gaming attorney working with casinos across the landscape in America, from Nevada across to New Jersey, Connecticut, Pennsylvania, et cetera. The old days of the retail casinos, they treated the gambling addicted customer as a VIP. And so if Bill Pascrell went into a casino and he dropped his weekly salary there, they'd say, "Don't worry, Bill, here's more markers. Here's more credit. Go in, just go for it." Well, we know with the online world, you can't gamble on credit. That's a good thing. That's why it's important to regulate and legislate online gaming and online sports betting. But I also think, why would you want to have a business that preys upon people's vulnerabilities and addictions? Because quite candidly, it's not sustainable. And then final point, every US operator is required to have an RG lead now. Originally, they weren't. This is kind of a new onboarding system where you have the head of RG for your company in America. The problem is that RG person in the company needs to be able to sit at the board table opposite from the revenue cycle people who don't care about RG because they think RG is getting in the way of them making more, commercial success and revenue. It's important, and I think Entain and BetMGM in particular, but many of the other top operators have also recognized, we want to have a long, sustainable industry, not just, sack people for a couple of months and then be out of business. So The way to do that is to make sure that consumers have a good experience and that you're not allowing consumers to go off the rails and start to use gambling as a coping mechanism. And, you see what happens with that. They end up getting into drug abuse, alcohol abuse, suicide, divorce, all kinds of issues because they haven't been protected properly. And the final point is prevention. That's the key to success. We don't want to get to therapeutics. You don't want to get to having to treat gambling addiction. You want to prevent it because it's far more cost efficient for government, regulators, and operators to handle it that way.
Exactly. No, you're hitting so many key points here with sustainability and everything. And I think BetMGM recently pledged as well that they're always going to have responsible gambling techs now in their marketing campaigns, I think. So they're really at the forefront when it comes to responsible gambling. But you mentioned that it has to be one person for RG in every company, but it's not set in stone that they have to be in the board. But is that across all legal states that everyone has implemented this? Okay, I wasn't aware.
All of the jurisdictions have required an RG lead. The most important thing about an operator's corporate structure, is that the CEO of the company, the boss of the company, whoever it is, has to take this seriously. It's not just checking a box. Oh, we need an RG lead because the regulators say so. Let's make, Joe Smith our RG lead. You have to support that person. You have to give them resources. You have to give them the opportunity to educate their own internal staff before they can start to make transformational change to an operator on the commercial side and on the consumer side.
Exactly. I think it has a lot to do with industry maturity as well, like coming into the maturity when you've been in the industry long, like, okay, this is very important. And for me, I think what we have to consider is also the next generation, generational health will be generational wealth as well. So that's super, super important. But I'm wondering, does this RG person requirement, is that only for mobile operators, or is that also for land-based and tribal casinos that they have to have a RG person?
Yeah, it's just a requirement on the digital side. Some operators have done it also on the retail side. It's not a requirement. The problem with the retail side is you walk into a casino, they check your ID. As long as you're 21, you're in, and that's it. Nobody tracks you. And that's why it's so important when we're talking to regulators and politicians in any jurisdiction, that they understand that the only reason people believe, conceive, have a perspective that gambling addiction increases when you legalize digital, that's a fallacy. What happens is you're able to now track it more properly. You can't track it on the retail side. That's a very important point. Number two, when you're talking about an RG lead, that person needs to be, they don't have to be on the board. They do have to be able to come to the board table to sort of educate the board that, yes, it's important to get more B2B business, more B2C business, to create more commercials to generate revenue, but we want to do it in a sustainable way. So it's not this and then that. It's more of a sustained business, and you do that through consumer protection. More and more, particularly in America and Canada, consumer protection is becoming critically important. Data privacy, consumer protection, those types of issues, because we are one newspaper headline away from some politician's son, daughter, brother, sister, mother, father going into the rat hole on gambling, and then the regulators will come down heavily. So we're lucky. We just celebrated our 5th anniversary with sports betting and are about to celebrate our 10th anniversary with online gaming in New Jersey, and other states have come on since. We haven't had any major problems with RG, but we don't have a lot of data to kind of get into how we can better handle it through markers of harm, through prevention instead of treatment. The sustainable way to do it is to kind of allow players to understand where they're going. Affordability checks, limits on time and play, limits on time of day you play, and being able to track the player's history. Yes, to also provide benefits to the commercial side, but also more importantly to protect your consumer, because there's nothing better than a good, healthy, protected consumer to create more revenue for your company in a long-term way.
Yes, I agree. And so you mentioned it's just like a matter of time before some senator's daughter or whatever plays, and a lot of these things that you talked about also is what we should do. And, essentially New York Times criticized us as an industry for trying to self-regulate as an industry. But personally, I think it's a good thing. I think that's something we have to do. But what do you think can be the worst case scenario if we don't get proper regulation in place for responsible gambling?
Well, I'm a big proponent and advocate of self-regulation if it's done in a meaningful way, not sort of a way for window dressing so we keep the regulators away, because ultimately, if you don't do it properly and responsibly, the whole industry is going to come crashing down. Don't forget, all of these operators who could have easily gone into the black market and not had to deal with any of these barriers to entry, cost of entry, compliance issues, regulatory issues, etc. I think the proper way to do it is to have a serious approach, like we've done in the US through the leadership of Martin Lichka, the chairman of the Entain Foundation for RG that I sit on with Amani Toomer, the former New York Giants Super Bowl champion, NFL footy player. We're going about it in a way that has technology, but also academic-based research with Rutgers University in New Jersey, with UNLV in Nevada, and with Harvard Medical School in Massachusetts, all doing multi-year studies. We've had conversations with some organizations in the RG space that say, oh my God, gambling addiction is shooting through the roof. And we say, where's your data to back that up? Oh, the calls to the 1-800 number. Calls to the 1-800 number is not a symbol of gambling addiction. Many people call that 1-800 number when they can't cash out, when they're having technology issues. So you have to really go down into the inner grassroots of those calls to find out, is somebody really calling because they're concerned about gambling addiction or have questions about treatment and prevention? Or are they calling because they're upset with the consumer experience? They're upset with not being able to cash out. They're upset with not being able to fund their wallet or other tech issues. And people have said, oh, wow, a lot of the folks in the RG space, not everyone, but a lot of them have an agenda. They want regulators and legislators to believe we're having an explosive problem with gambling addiction. That is not the case. So I like to work with organizations. For example, the New Jersey Council on Compulsive Gambling is a great organization, heading up by Felicia Gorlin. She's doing a great job and she gets it. She works collaboratively with the operators and the regulators. And so what we've done, Martin Lichka, under his leadership, we've created the 12 principles of RG that the top 10 operators have embraced. If the operator looks at the 1-800 number on their consumer-facing page as a check-the-box experience, we're gonna have major problems. So you gotta take it seriously. This is not just some dog and pony show. It's a real-life experience. But we also have to look at another point, Catie. Not just the consumer, which is very important and critical, but also the players in sport. The professional players, make sure they're not being upon. They're not doing stupid stuff that affect integrity. They're not going down a rat hole with gambling addiction. So it's the players in the consumer side, but it's also the professional athletes and collegiate athletes who organizations like Epic Risk Management are trying to help prevent from going down that sideway ramp.
I think being proactive is so important as well. But if you are proactive, you won't see as high number to do research on as well. So, but I'm wondering, this research you've done, do you, based on that, where do you think the gambling industry is going to be in 10 years?
Well,
based on your research and just your personal opinion.
Yeah, first of all, most of the research is ongoing. It's a multi-year study, so we don't have the final data, number one. Number two, it's very hard to say this, but I'm going to say it. It's true, and I'd be happy to debate anybody about it. The consumer experience needs to be drastically improved. It's okay, but it's not sustainable over time because players, particularly those in their 20s and 30s, are requiring so much more. They want a beautiful user experience, and they're getting very baseline stuff. Part of that is because of the expense of getting into the market, the expense of compliance, the expense of player acquisition. It's far more expensive to acquire a player and then lose them. You have to retain them. And the best way to do that is to be consumer protection conscious, but also to give them a better experience. So for example, I think the future of our industry is live casino.
Oh yeah? Okay.
Oh yeah, I think that's massively important. Young people aren't going to a casino retail as much as they have in years past. The experience is more about a nightclub experience with you know proper entertainment and proper booze and a proper experience, perhaps with canapes and all that. But you know, it's also very interesting because they're looking for more of an experience, not just sitting at a blackjack table or throwing craps or going roulette or going onto a slot machine. It's maybe doing skill-based games on the casino floor. So yeah, I think that's the future, and we have a long way to catch up. And don't forget, the metaverse is here, and it's here to stay.
No, it's super interesting. But do you think that regulation stifles the user experience?
I think that regulation doesn't stifle it, but it does slow it down and impact it. Operators are looking for ways to cut costs. So, you know, they do the best they can to comply with the regulations, because if they don't, they'll be in a penalty box. But I think that the regulators, particularly in the US, we know that regulators in the UK and Germany have been over the top, and rightfully so, because there were thousands of online gaming companies. Don't forget, we only have 3, 4, 5 dozen online gaming companies in America, because in most states they have to be tethered to a brick and mortar casino, right? So it's different. You don't have like 2,500 iGaming companies in the UK. We don't have that. No. But I think the more operators realize that the reason they're in the situation they're in Europe, okay, is because they didn't have a really good partnership with regulators, sharing information, being collaborative, explaining to regulators that our adversaries in the black market are making gazillions of dollars without the costs that we have for compliance and taxes and licensing fees and AML and geolocation, etc. They don't have any of those expenses.
No.
Now, I think what's happening, and we're going to be debating this a lot the second half of this year, Catie, and you've seen it yourself. There are some folks in the regulated markets in Europe that are thinking about going back to the gray and black market because it's been so burdensome to them. And what can be done about that? Well, if people do that, or operators do that in jurisdictions, if they also operate in a regulated jurisdiction, they should be shut down. You should not be allowed to operate.
I agree. I totally agree. I agree. It's but it's a very like sensitive subject because most people don't think like you and I. They don't think it should be like this.
Right.
But if we look back at like which markets do you think the US can take inspiration from them, or is there maybe a US market or a state in the US that you think is doing it better than another?
I do.
Okay, tell me.
And I think most people, when they hear this, will be required to agree with me, but they will also say, well, Bill's from New Jersey. New Jersey has gotten it right. First state in the nation to do sports betting, had the 10-year case outside of Nevada. First state in the nation to regulate iGaming. It's been going incredibly well. We don't have any RG escalation. We don't have any AML issues. Geolocation in the beginning was a little dodgy. That all got sorted. I think if anybody in the world, let alone the US, wants to look at a properly regulated market, and by the way, the New Jersey Division of Gaming Enforcement is a very tough gaming enforcement organization.
Yes, I know.
They're not the gold standard, they're the platinum standard.
Mm-hmm.
They are very good, but they're also very easy to work with because they're not here to just, hurt you and slap you and fine you. They're here to make it a more sustainable industry. So look, I think there's lots of really good jurisdictions. I think Colorado has been excellent, very, very good. I think Pennsylvania's been good. But I also think there are many jurisdictions who haven't gotten the tax rate right. Mm-hmm. Our tax rate is 14.5%, which is good. Yeah, compared to New York, right? But I also think that the way we've regulated online, which by the way, we had no experience with. 10 years ago, there was no online.
You were like the first. Yeah, you were the first. Yeah.
We were the first, and we hired, which was my advice, we hired Mario Galea from the MGA, the Malta Gaming Authority. He came in for 2 years, developed all the regulations, got it all right. And Mario, I was just with him in Malta last week, Catie. He's a brilliant person. He's got a big heart. He's Maltese born and bred. And I would suggest any regulatory regime in the world, but particularly in America, that's starting out like North Carolina, Rhode Island, you should bring in Mario Galea to advise you because he gets it right, and he got it right for New Jersey.
Nice. Okay. I actually don't know him personally, but I have worked in New Jersey 5 years, and I have worked a lot with them. And you have to so I work with CRM. I had to send in every single marketing campaign we did. But of course, sometimes there were mistakes, and we had to contact them. And they're so easy to deal with, but you have to be really thorough. And I think it's a really good thing. In the beginning, it was a little bit scary when it was so regulated because there's nothing in Europe. No European market is so strict as the US one. But again, I've learned from it, and I think that's great. But looking in New Jersey then, so can you tell me a little bit what kind of RG tool requirements are there for operators? Do you know, like self-exclusion, obviously, deposit limits, or what does it look like in New Jersey?
Yeah, well, there is self-exclusion. The problem with self-exclusion in one state is it's not federal. So if I self-exclude in New Jersey, I could just go across the bridge to Pennsylvania, Connecticut, or New York. And some good, responsible operators are now sharing that list with their colleagues in the bordering states for the same company to self-exclude. So if I self-exclude in New Jersey, MGM will also self-exclude me in New York and Pennsylvania and Connecticut.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah, so that's not required because of data privacy issues.
That's precautionary measure.
Correct. Well, as we discussed, every company has to have an RG lead. That RG lead has to report into the DGE periodically. There are requirements to have brief videos during the player's experience, educating them on what they can do to prevent problem gambling, or if you have a problem, where to go to. Short videos that have to be run. They have to track players. There are not deposit limits, but there are affordability checks. So, you know, they're sort of getting it right. New Jersey announced in January, well, May of last year, but it became effective in January, the gold standard for industry standard for RG in New Jersey. That's a developing process. I believe the DG will be coming out with additional technology requirements. And as Dave Reebok and Afshian and Lou Rigacki and Michael Golub have all said from the DG, this is an ongoing conversation. It's not static, it's fluid. So they're going to be changing things. And if there are things in place that are not useful, they'll get rid of them. There are things in place that are overly burdensome. They'll socialize it so it's more elegant for the operators. It's not about just trying to slap people on the wrist or make it look good. It's an ongoing educational process.
I completely agree. But so this is for the operators, but do you think suppliers and vendors also carry a responsibility to focus on responsible gambling, or what are your thoughts there?
Well, there aren't many requirements yet in place in America for suppliers or vendors. I do think they have a responsibility, and quite candidly, I've said this, and you've heard me say it, both with you and you know, when you've heard me. You got to be silly if you're a payment processor, an affiliate, a B2B provider of any sort, not to be concerned about this issue. But a lot of times people come into a commercial experience and just do the minimum. I'm going to only do what I'm required to do. And there's not a lot required for RG. So I am hoping that the suppliers will begin to embrace this themselves and do more. And I will tell you this, and I've said this for the last 4 or 5 years, the most important supplier are the affiliates. And the affiliates have a massive opportunity to get ahead of the curve because they're talking to the consumers every day. And they are ultimately commercial educators. They're educating consumers on where to go and where not to go. So what better way than to use affiliates as a vehicle and a tool to provide prevention for RG. Final point, you get very inexperienced regulations like Massachusetts tried to do with banning affiliates. That is the worst idea in the world. Banning affiliates, banning advertising, banning marketing would only result in a trampoline effect on problem gambling. And the reason for that is the affiliates are licensed in most jurisdictions, not everywhere, and they are also concerned about creating a more sustainable experience because that benefits them. And so I am hopeful that we can continue to try to bring the affiliates together, as we've talked about when we were in, where were we together? In London, I guess.
New York. Yeah.
New York, New York, that's right, New York. I'm hoping we can bring the affiliates together to work more collaboratively, because I think that most regulators don't have a lot of experience dealing with affiliates. They just kind of, oh yeah, you need to register as a vendor and that's it. Affiliates could be an awesome tool to impact the RG experience.
I think it's really, I agree with you totally, but it's also like having worked with the US a couple of years now, I don't know why, but operators do not like affiliates. They do not want to work with us for some reason. But it is like you say, like having worked for an operator, again, like an operator usually focuses on like the post, after everything has happened. You have the FAQ, you have customer support, but it's not so much that is proactive. And that's where the affiliates are really on. They talk about games, they talk about which games to play, how to play them, and all of that. So if we include responsible gambling there, I think it would educate so much wider audience quicker. Um, so yeah, no, I totally agree with you in everything you said there. But going back to like looking at career-wise and stuff, like I think for me, when it comes to responsible gambling, like I mentioned before, it's also like a maturity. As soon as I realized I'm going to stay in this industry for the rest of my career, I thought, I can't just, I have to do something good with it. I want to leave feeling that I helped, I did something, positive. So what advice do you have for other industry peers that wants to get more involved in responsible gambling?
Well, when I first started out in the business in the US with online, I realized something pretty quickly, and it's almost axiomatic or obvious today, but it wasn't so early on. I used to get more calls than I could handle from my clients and prospective clients on how to get talent, because there was no talent in America. Most of the original early organic talent came from abroad because we had no experience with online gaming. I love speaking to young folks. I love showing my passion and energy at my late stage in life. My son Billy, who's just turned 30, is a young fella and is in the industry now. He chose it. I didn't push him to it. But more importantly, there are so many opportunities to not only be successful in terms of your title, the money you make, the compensation, but in terms of being satisfied about impacting society, right? RG is not looked at, or gambling addiction is not looked at the way we look at alcoholism or drug abuse or spousal abuse. We don't look at it the same way. We almost think it's a victimless problem, and it's not.
No.
So there are so many opportunities, and a lot of young people in America don't even know about this, right? It's a very tech-savvy industry. It's a young industry. It's fun. It's hospitality. So I strongly, when I go into grammar schools and high schools and colleges, I strongly advocate for getting into this industry. You don't have to be a lawyer. You don't have to be a marketer. You don't have to be into compliance. You can be into social responsibility. You could be into marketing. You could be into the CRM. There are so many different tracks: accounting, data, technology. Not many industries provide all those opportunities, and it's fun. I mean, look, the healthcare industry is great, but wouldn't say it's fun, right? You're dealing with people's lives and traumas. This is a fun industry, and when it stops being fun, that's when I'll get out of it.
No, but I couldn't agree more. Like, I think I've told you before, I dropped out of school at age 18. So, I don't have any higher education. I just started customer support at a gambling company straight away. And I actually had someone ask me last week, like, oh, I want to be where you are. And I was like, it took me 12 years to get here, but, it's possible. Like, this industry is so easy to work with. It's very tech savvy, like you said, it's very young, and it's fun. Most of all the people are my friends, like you get friends so easily. But speaking of like your career, this is a final question. Obviously you had a lot of like career goals achieved, I can imagine, but what's your next thing? Like, what's the next career goal that you have that you will feel like, okay, if this goes through, I feel like I've made it?
Wow, that's a very good question. I would say I am very fortunate and blessed, and I thank the good Lord. I have a good family, I have good health, and I've been successful to a degree. I am not really, and I'm trying to say it the right way so people understand my sincerity and my commitment. I'm really not chasing the almighty dollar as much as I did years ago. because I grew up in a very humble family. We didn't have money, so I wanted to be able to provide for my kids the way, you know, I wasn't able to experience when I was growing up. You know, I had to have a job all the time. I had to, you know, make sacrifices as my parents have. I love my parents. They taught me well. I think you're getting me to reflect on something I haven't thought a lot about. But I want to continue to provide the benefits of focusing on RG. Number two, I love the fact I serve on multiple boards now and they're compensated. You know, at some point in time, I'm not going to be able to crisscross the globe like I'm doing now. I'm not going to be able to work 18 hours a day like I do now. I'm going to have to slow down. I love being on boards. I love giving my experience and advice. And I think I will look at my success if I'm able to motivate young people to get into the industry. That'll be a success for me. I don't need to be the CEO of some big company. I don't need to make, you know, tenfold of what I'm making now. I'm very happy and comfortable, but I'm also aggressive because I like to solve problems.
That's amazing. I love that. I love that. That's great, Bill. Thank you so much for sharing everything with me. Okay, guys, we're going to cut it off here. Thank you so much for coming in and talking to me, and hopefully we can do this again sometime.
Thank you, Catie. Thanks for having me.
Okay, thank you. Bye-bye.